Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. My first conscious thought of the day was looking forward to the weekend. It was Friday, and I had one more day of work before I was free. Tomorrow, I would spend the whole day with two of my favorite girls, Jana, my 4-year-old daughter, and my mom. I planned to do some odd jobs around Mom's house, then spend the rest of the day playing with Jana in the backyard. My wife, Jenny, was out of town for work and wouldn't be back until late Sunday, so I had Jana all to myself. After I got Jana off to kindergarten, I headed to work for a half day of putting the new course catalog on our website. I finished sooner than expected and was heading home by 10:30. I returned to a big empty house. I couldn't pick up Jana until 1 o'clock, so I had some time to throw a few things in the car and grab a sandwich. While munching on a peanut butter and banana sandwich, I started tossing clothes and supplies onto a pile on the bed. A bottle of shampoo rolled off and onto the floor on Jenny's side. Using my best telekinetic abilities, I tried to make it come back up, but as usual, I failed. So I had to walk over and physically pick it up. I didn't immediately see it, so I knelt down and fished around under the bed. It wasn't there, so I reached under the nightstand and came back with a bottle of shampoo and a book. It appeared to be a journal of some sort. I debated whether to read it, feeling torn between respecting Jenny's privacy and a growing suspicion. Curiosity won, and I opened to the first page. It was dated 11 months ago, and I immediately recognized Jenny's handwriting. It began, April 20, 2007, Friday. I've decided keeping this journal is in my best interest. I can only see doom and gloom ahead. I know that what I've done and will do will hurt Randy and Jana, but I can't find a way out. Maybe writing it all down will help if things go wrong. I hope some good comes from it. I read the entry from April 20, which detailed an incident at work involving missing money from accounts she managed. She wrote about her confusion and disbelief at being accused of stealing $24,000. When she protested her innocence, she was fired and escorted out. Later that day, one of the executives, Lloyd Butcher, called her back to his office. After much pleading on her part, Lloyd offered her a deal. He would cover the missing money if she agreed to become his personal assistant. She accepted, hoping to fix the situation and eventually pay him back. Jenny's journal revealed disturbing details about her new role. Lloyd had her accompany him to company functions, dress in provocative ways, and perform tasks that went beyond administrative duties. The more I read, the worse it got. As I continued reading, I felt my body grow colder. The journal described in detail how Lloyd manipulated and coerced Jenny into compromising situations, using the missing money as leverage. She wrote about feeling trapped and torn between her love for us and the circumstances she was in. I was consumed with anger and helplessness. My hands were shaking, and tears streamed down my face as I read about how she was treated. Jenny admitted to feeling some pleasure in the attention she received, though her guilt and self-hatred were evident throughout her entries. I wanted to stop reading, but I couldn't. I kept going, wanting to understand the full extent of her betrayal. I was horrified by the depth of her entanglement. The phone rang, jolting me back to reality. It was the school secretary, Wendy, calling to remind me that I was late picking up Jana. I cursed under my breath, grabbed the journal, and ran out the door. When I arrived, Jana was sitting in a chair, arms crossed. Her expression softened as she ran to hug me, not noticing the tear that fell onto her back. On the drive to Mom's, I took back roads, needing time to process everything. Jana fell asleep in the backseat. At Mom's house, I started working on her list of chores. It was a welcome distraction. The weight of what I'd read stayed heavy on my heart. I only managed to complete a few tasks before breaking down in tears. Later, Mom sat beside me on the picnic table, asking gently what was wrong. I tried to explain, but all I could do was cry in her arms like a child. I told Mom about Jenny's betrayal and how I felt our marriage was over. She listened quietly, offering comforting words and reminding me that I needed to be there for Jana, I felt lost, unsure of how to move forward. I knew I had to confront Jenny, but I dreaded what I might hear. The next morning, I sat at the edge of the bed, exhausted from a sleepless night. I could smell Mom's fried apples, which lured me downstairs. After breakfast, I asked her to watch Jonna while I went to clear my head at the old grotto, a place I had always gone to think. With Jenny's journal in hand, I set out. I sat by the edge of the grotto, feeling the crushing weight of betrayal. The entries that followed described increasingly disturbing situations that Jenny was coerced into. She detailed how she was used by various executives and customers. I felt my anger transform into a desire for revenge, not just against Lloyd, but against everyone who had wronged us. By the time I returned home with Jonna, I was resolute. I had to confront Jenny, to force her to admit the truth, no matter how painful. When she finally returned from her trip, I threw the journal across the room, narrowly missing her head. She was stunned, and I could see the terror in her eyes. She stepped outside, crying violently. When she came back inside, she asked what I planned to do. I told her that I hadn't decided yet, but whatever it was, it would be big. I demanded the truth, asking if she'd enjoyed what she'd done. She admitted to feeling pleasure but maintained that it was different from what we had. I couldn't believe her. Over the next few days, we barely spoke. The tension was unbearable. On Monday, I accompanied Jenny to work, determined to confront Lloyd. As soon as I entered his office, I was ambushed by 2 security guards. Lloyd taunted me, making it clear he owned Jenny and would harm Jonna if I continued to interfere. I was helpless. Later that week, Detective Archer arrived to inform me that Jenny had been murdered by Lloyd in a fit of rage. As I processed this news, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. I had never intended for Jenny to die. I just wanted her to suffer like I had. The detective handed me Jenny's autopsy report, revealing she had been HIV positive. I realized the nightmare was far from over. The aftermath was chaotic. The health department declared an HIV outbreak linked to Jenny's activities, impacting hundreds of people. Thompson Incorporated faced lawsuits, and I filed claims of my own, eventually winning a significant settlement. I decided to move away with Jonna, hoping to start over. By June 2010, I was packing up the house and preparing to leave town. As I drove away, I reflected on everything that had happened. I felt like I had lost everything. But the sight of Jana sleeping in the backseat reminded me that there was still hope for a new beginning. My first conscious thought of the day was looking forward to the weekend. It was Friday, and I had one more day of work before I was free. Tomorrow, I was going to spend the whole day with 2 of my favorite girls, Jana, my 4-year-old daughter, and my mom. My plan was to do some odd jobs around my mom's house and afterward, spend the rest of the day playing with Jana in the backyard. My wife, Jenny, was out of town for work and wouldn't be back until late Sunday, so I had Jana all to myself. After I got Jana off to kindergarten, I headed to work for a fun half-day of putting the new course catalog on our internet site. When I was done, I could pick up Jana and head out. I finished a lot sooner than expected and was heading home at 10:30. I came home to a big empty house. I couldn't pick up Jana until 1 o'clock, so that gave me some time to throw a few things in the car and grab a sandwich. While munching on my peanut butter and banana sandwich with my left hand, I started tossing what clothes and supplies we would need for the week into a pile on the bed with my right. Computer geeks know how to eat and work at the same time. A bottle of shampoo I tossed on the pile rolled off and onto the floor on Jenny's side. I used my best telekinetic abilities to try to make it come back up, but as usual, I failed. So I had to walk over and physically pick it up. I didn't immediately see it, so it must have rolled somewhere. I knelt down and fumbled around under the bed. It wasn't there, so I went fishing under the nightstand. I came back with a bottle of shampoo and a book. I wondered if Jenny knew this was under there. As I looked at the little book, it wasn't one of her novels or some reference book for her work. It appeared to be a journal of some sort. I sat on the bed for a long time, debating whether to open it, and read what was inside. On one hand, I didn't want to invade Ginny's privacy if this was some sort of personal diary. But on the other hand, if there was something in it that I should know, then maybe I had to read it. It may be completely innocent, and then it may not. The need to know won out, and I opened to the first page, immediately recognizing Jenny's handwriting. So, there could be no doubt about who wrote it. The date of the entry was 11 months ago. I started reading the journal entry dated April 20, 2007. Friday. I've decided that keeping this journal is in my best interest. I don't know what the future will bring, but at the moment, I can only see doom and gloom. I know that everything I've done and will do will end up hurting Randy and Jonna, but I'm so stuck. I can't find any way out, and I feel I'm screwed in a very big way. Maybe keeping track of everything will, in some small way, help should things hit the fan. I don't know if it will, but one thing I do know is it won't change a damn thing. I just hope some good can come of it. This whole mess started just over a month ago, when one of my bosses called me into his office. Lloyd Butcher is one of the executive managers for Thompson, and is a powerful and imposing man. Everybody knows not to mess with him. He was with one of the internal auditors, Carl Cashman. They told me that some of the accounts I was responsible for were short some money. $24,000 to be exact. They showed me the paperwork that indicated my deposits were $1,000 short each time I made one. It looked like I took out $1,000 in cash at the time of the deposit. They said that they wanted to give me an opportunity to explain what happened to the money before they went to the corporate office and the police. I didn't have any idea about the money. I never took anything. But they had a solid paper trail showing that $1,000 cash was missing each time I made a deposit. I told them I didn't do anything wrong, and that I didn't know about the missing money. I tried to explain, but they wouldn't listen. I ended up breaking down and crying right in front of them. They said that since I had no explanation, they had no alternative but to turn the matter over to the authorities. I had to go back to my desk and clean it out. I was terminated and escorted off the property at the end of the day. I went back to my desk and cried. Around 4 o'clock, Mr. Butcher called and said he wanted to talk about my situation and to come to his office. After a lot of discussion and a lot of pleading and crying on my part, he said he believed my story and felt sorry for me. He said that he might have a way to fix it, but I had to trust him. He offered me a deal. He wouldn't turn the matter over to the authorities, and he would personally cover the missing money if I would become his personal assistant. The job had been vacant ever since his previous assistant didn't show up for work one day, and nobody ever heard from her again. I would have a new job working just for him, and I wouldn't be handling any money. He said that I could trust him to help me out of the mess I was in, and over time I could pay back what I owed him. It sounded too good to be true, and I was happy to take him up on his offer. Besides, going from a contract specialist to an executive manager's personal assistant was an increase in salary and responsibility. I asked him how I was going to pay back the money that I owed. I didn't actually know, and he said to trust him. He would make it all clear after I settled into the job. He said that he would call the auditor and tell him that he found the missing money in another account that he had forgotten to mention before, and that I was only doing what I was told to do. I would be off the hook with them. That night I told Randy about my promotion, but I didn't mention anything about any missing money. He was so happy for me that I just couldn't say anything about it. This was my problem, and Randy has always wanted me to work out my own issues before coming to him for help, and I didn't want to disappoint him this time. I'll never forget how he looked at me as we sat at Sabatini's and sipped our drinks. He said that I was moving up in the corporate world, and my future looked good. He was so proud of me. The next day, I moved into my new office. It was a small outer office with a door leading to a small lounge in the back, which had a full bathroom, a closet for clothes, and a small couch. There was also another door that connected to another lounge at the back of Mr. Butcher's office. His lounge was arranged the same way, but his had a larger couch and a small, fully equipped bar. As the news got around the office that I was Mr. Butcher's new administrative assistant, I received a lot of stares from my female coworkers and smiles from the men. I didn't know what any of it meant, and it felt kind of strange. Later that day, Mr. Butcher called me into his office, and I sat next to his desk as he told me about my duties. He explained that I had the usual assistant responsibilities: keeping his appointments, greeting company clients, typing and filing, making his coffee, etc. He also said that I was required to accompany him to company functions and meetings at times outside of regular work hours. I may even be required to accompany him to meetings out of town. Then he told me about how he expected me to dress. He said that I was his personal representative and a representative of the company, and I needed to dress the part. I always thought that I dressed nicely, but he said that I dressed too conservatively and wanted something more suited to his assistant. He suggested wearing shorter skirts and mentioned that I should avoid pantyhose, opting instead for stockings or going bare-legged. I could wear a camisole if I wanted, but it wasn't necessary. He advised me to keep my hair loose and flowing over my shoulders. I sat there in total amazement. When I started to say something, he put his hand up and stopped me before I could get a word out. He said I was to change the way I dressed because he wanted me to display my beauty and not hide it. He believed it would be beneficial to have a confident woman present when clients and other managers met with him. He also reminded me about the missing money and said that I had to start dressing the way he wanted starting the next day, or he would terminate our agreement. He assured me that I could trust him and that he wouldn't do anything to hurt or embarrass me, explaining that he knew what he was doing. I was in a daze and couldn't think straight. I didn't know what to say. All I could do was sit quietly and stare down at my hands. He pushed an envelope over to me and told me to take the afternoon off and go shopping for some new clothes that would align with his suggestions. He said that if I was worried about what my husband would think, I could keep my new wardrobe at work and change into it first thing in the morning, then switch back to my regular clothes before going home. But while at work or with him during company functions, I had to dress according to his guidelines. I took the envelope and went back to my office and thought about it. On one hand, he assured me that he wouldn't do anything to hurt or embarrass me. But on the other hand, I might get a lot of stares and strange remarks from people around the office. I was stuck anyway because of the missing money. The more I thought about it, the more I considered that it might be exciting to have people look at me and think I was beautiful. I had always felt rather plain, and maybe I deserved to look and feel confident for once. However, I drew the line at certain clothing choices. That afternoon, I went shopping and left everything in the trunk of my car. The next day, I went to work wearing my usual business suit, but changed into one of my purchases in the bathroom. It was a simple white blouse and a short black skirt that felt quite different from what I was used to. I didn't wear stockings because the length of the skirt wouldn't accommodate them, and I felt oddly exposed without a bra. Afterward, I stayed in my office to focus on my work. Around lunchtime, Mr. Butcher called me into his office and requested that I enter through our connecting lounges. As I walked in, I noticed him leaning against the front of his desk. He complimented my appearance, but emphasized that I needed to adhere to his guidelines regarding my wardrobe. He asked if I was wearing a bra, and when I replied that I wasn't, he insisted that I show him. I felt uncomfortable but complied, unbuttoning my blouse to reveal that I wasn't wearing one. He acknowledged this, and then instructed me to pull my skirt up so he could check that I wasn't wearing pantyhose. Though I hesitated, I felt compelled to follow his orders and did as he asked. He remarked on my appearance before sitting down behind his desk. As I started to lower my skirt, he reminded me to keep it up until he said otherwise. I stood there quietly, looking down at my hands, feeling overwhelmed. After a few moments, he instructed me to get dressed and return to work. This pattern continued each day, and on Monday, he asked me to remove my blouse again, and I felt tears welling up in my eyes as I did. He instructed me to lower my hands and insisted that I remove my skirt as well. I was left feeling vulnerable, but he simply observed, making comments that left me feeling conflicted. On the following Monday, after another inspection, he told me to sit in the chair across from him. He explained that part of my role as his assistant was to ensure his satisfaction. When I expressed confusion, he made it clear that he expected me to fulfill certain personal requests. I was shocked and informed him that I couldn't do anything that would hurt my husband, but he warned me that my job and the safety of my family was at stake if I didn't comply. That night, I wrestled with my thoughts, debating whether to confide in Randy, but ultimately decided to handle the situation myself. I cried a lot, feeling trapped in my circumstances. Randy believed I was unwell, so he took care of everything at home. The following day, when we went through the wardrobe inspection again, I reluctantly agreed to his requests. Before I left the office, he asked for a brief moment of my time, and I instinctively stepped back, afraid. He warned me about the consequences of hesitation and demanded that I comply without question. He circled around me, assessing me, and then abruptly returned to his desk, telling me to get dressed and go back to work. The next day, he summoned me again while on the phone and gestured for me to come over and sit back to work. The next day, he summoned me again while on the phone and gestured for me to come over and sit next to him. When I did, he started rubbing my back and shoulders and instructed me to approach my tasks with enthusiasm. I was not to feign enjoyment. He released my hair and told me he needed to discipline me, then asked me to get dressed and return to my desk. That evening, I felt a heavy weight on my conscience as I stared at Randy while he made supper, reflecting on how I had betrayed him. I hated what I had done and loathed myself for it. I went to bed early and cried myself to sleep. The next day, Lloyd called me into his office again. He was standing beside his desk on the phone when he ordered me to remove my clothing. I felt overwhelmed by the situation. Afterward, I showered, but the shame lingered. I knew I was spiraling down a troubling path, unable to find a way out. Over the next couple of weeks, I complied with Lloyd's request when he called, undressing in my lounge before walking into his office. I became increasingly uncomfortable with the situation, but the tears and guilt continued to follow me afterward. One day, I entered his office and saw Carl Cashman, the internal auditor. Lloyd mentioned how impressed he was with my performance and instructed me to demonstrate it. I was taken aback and refused, insisting that I had not agreed to anything beyond my initial arrangement. Lloyd dismissed Carl and put on a DVD, showing a recording of previous encounters. He claimed to have documented every interaction and threatened to share the footage with my husband and family if I didn't comply. No choice left. I reluctantly agreed to his demands. By then, I felt emotionally numb, and my sense of guilt was diminishing. This marked the beginning of Lloyd involving me with others. Since that day, I found myself fulfilling requests from several executives, including Mr. Jenkins, Mr. Schmidt, and Peter Kensington, while Lloyd watched. He informed me that my role had shifted. I would now be available to any executive manager by appointment and was expected to meet their needs as I had his. This arrangement extended to attending management meetings and engaging with potential customers. I felt trapped, like I had become an office worker for everyone. The reason for this journal entry is to document how I ended up in this situation. I hope that by recording my experiences, I can find a way out someday. I feel immense guilt for what I'm doing to Randy. If he discovered the truth, he would likely leave me and take our daughter, Jana, with him. I feared for Lloyd's safety, knowing how strict Randy's moral code is and how much I had violated it. I hate myself for the pain I've caused, but I was manipulated by Lloyd, who deceived me at every turn. Now I find myself in so deep that I can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I know that what I'm doing is incredibly wrong, but I feel powerless to stop. I don't care about my own fate. I just don't want to hurt the two people I love most, Randy and Jana. Please, God, help me find a way to forgive myself for this. After closing the journal, I sat on the bed, realizing my shirt was damp with tears. In frustration, I threw the journal across the room, sending it crashing into our wedding picture. My fists clenched, and I felt an overwhelming urge to lash out, to scream, to confront Lloyd. Without thinking, I went to the bathroom, and after feeling sick, I rinsed my face under cold water, trying to clear my head. Returning to the bedroom, I picked up the journal and adjusted the picture I had knocked over. I gazed at the photo of Ginny in her wedding gown, remembering how beautiful she looked that day. Her beautiful long black hair was piled up on top of her head for the wedding, but normally it flowed straight down her back. She had the sweetest smile, with deep pools on each side that the word dimples couldn't describe adequately. People have always compared her to Princess Diana, with her regal nose and wide-set eyes. I just thought she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever met. I touched her face behind the broken glass and set the frame back down. I sat on the bed and opened the book to read some more when the phone rang. "Hello, Mr. Brooks. This is Wendy at James Street Elementary. Jana is here in the office waiting for you to pick her up. Kindergarten was over 30 minutes ago, and we were worried when you didn't show up. Is everything all right?" I looked down at my watch and cursed silently. Yes, I just lost track of time. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. Thanks." I tossed the journal on the pile of stuff we needed for the weekend, grabbed the corners of the bedspread, and lifted it. I looked like some sort of a bargain basement Santa as I carried everything out to the car and dropped it in the trunk. As promised, in 10 minutes, I was walking into James Street Elementary School. Jana was sitting in a chair with her arms crossed, looking quite mad. When she saw me come in, she gave me an angry sideways look for a moment, but her face softened and she ran to me and gave me the most wonderful hug. She didn't see the tear that fell on her back as she did. The drive to Mom's house usually takes only an hour by using the highways, but I wanted to review what I just read and think about what I should do. So I took back roads the whole way. When I arrived, Jana was asleep, so I carried her up to the spare bedroom and told Mom that I was going to start on the list of jobs. Ever since Dad died, I was the one who did Mom's little maintenance jobs that she couldn't do by herself. I really just wanted to be alone with my thoughts. I worked well into the night. Mom brought me dinner in the middle of the backyard, where I was cutting limbs out of her maple tree. All the while, I thought about what I read. I was heartbroken and had to stop work several times to wipe away the tears. I had only read one entry dated 11 months ago, but I thought that if this started way back then, how far had it gone? What more devastating news about my wife would I discover when I read the rest? I was in no hurry to find out if my life was over, if my marriage was over. Well, after dark, Mom came out and sat next to me on the picnic table. "What's wrong?" she asked gently. All I could do was look at her in the dim light like a 6-year-old whose favorite puppy just died. I fell into her arms and cried. I didn't cry tears of a grown man, but tears of a little boy that wanted his mommy to make things all right again. I cried on her shoulder, and she held me and patted my head. After crying on her shoulder for much too long, I sat up and wiped my face. I looked down at the ground and said, "Mom, I just found out something about Jenny. Something that makes me believe we can't be together anymore. It's bad, Mom. Really bad. I don't know what to do right now. I want to hurt her. But I love her too much. I just can't stand idly by and let things continue like they are. I've got to do something. I just don't continue like they are. I've got to do something. I just don't know what. I know I've got to be a man and do what I need to do, but I don't know if I've got the strength. It's really a mess, Mom." My mother has always had a serenity and wisdom about her. Usually wisdom comes with age, but she's always had it for some reason. When everybody was running around like crazy, screaming and hollering, she was calm and serene. She always knew what to say in every situation to make things better. I've always trusted whatever she said. She looked up into my eyes and said what I knew to be right. "Randy, I've always believed that you were a good man, maybe better than you think you are. If you say that you have a problem with Guinea, then I believe you have it within yourself to fix it. You may have to forgive her for whatever it was she did, or you may have to cut your losses and run. Either way, I know you can do the right thing. Just remember 2 things. First, don't do anything that would hurt that little girl of yours. Jana is a wonderful child, and she needs her father. Second, I'll always be here for you. I've got your back if you need it. I paused to think about what she said. I knew it had deeper meaning than just the words she used, so that meant I would have one more thing to think about this weekend. Thanks, Mom. I knew I could count on you to tell your little boy to be a man. I'll do what I have to, and I promise Jana won't be hurt. We walked arm in arm through the dark backyard to the house. She went into the living room, and I went to check on Jana. March 15, 2008, Saturday. I didn't sleep much, maybe a few minutes here and there, so that's why I felt tired as I sat on the edge of the bed watching the sun come up through the window. I could smell Mom's fried apples drawing me down to breakfast, so that's why I felt tired as I sat on the edge of the bed watching the sun come up through the window. I could smell Mom's fried apples drawing me down to breakfast, so I got up, cleaned up, and went downstairs. "Morning," I said. "Good morning. I won't ask how you slept because I could hear you tossing and turning all night. Just eat your breakfast. You'll figure it out." "Thanks, Mom. Oh, after I finish my work today, can you watch Jana for a little while? I want to walk back to the old grotto. I promise I won't do anything irresponsible. I just want to be alone for a while to think. That's all." "Okay, but be careful. I don't want to have to go back there and drag you home like after your father's viewing. Just relax and do what you have to do. Jana and I will have a wonderful day." It was just after lunchtime when I finished all the little jobs on the list, and then a few more I found to do. Mom and Jana had gone grocery shopping, so I grabbed Jenny's journal and a couple of beers from the fridge and started walking toward the woods. When I was a kid, I used to go to the edge of the grotto to be by myself when the weight of the world felt heavy on my shoulders. It was my safe harbor, a place to think and make decisions. Sometimes my best friend and I would sit at the edge for hours, discussing our plans for the future, a 150-foot hole. I sat with my back against a rock and looked out over the edge. It hadn't changed much since the last time I was there, just after my father's funeral. I took a long drink from one of the beers and opened the journal. The entries after the first added nothing to what I already knew or helped with the dilemma I was in. She mentioned the men she had been involved with and what they did together, and for the most part, her accounts were dry and emotionless. But occasionally, she expressed how wonderful something felt or how much fun she had. She still sounded remorseful when writing about me, though. As the entries progressed, the writing seemed more relaxed and matter-of-fact. The things she did, however, were shocking. I came to one entry and read the entry dated October 20, 2007, Saturday. "This past week was absolutely incredible. I would have never believed I had it in me to do what I did. But I did. Well, let's see where to begin. Okay, Friday a week ago, Lloyd said that we were going to deliver the fiscal year-end bonuses to the sales team in the region. Every day, we were going to drive to a different branch office and meet with the sales staff. I was told to dress nicely for the meetings. On Monday, we went to the Western Region branch office. We met with the 4 salesmen, Jim Gray, Polly Suis, Melvin McCabe, John, and the department sales manager, Norman Gray. Lloyd told them how proud he was that they were the top producing branch this year and that he was there to deliver their bonuses. He added that, in addition to the check, every one of them could spend 2 hours in a hotel room with me. They could do whatever they wanted. All but one of the men seemed excited. As I stood there, Lloyd gave me a key and told me to go to the hotel and wait. An hour later, the first man came, and we were together. He left, and then the next man arrived a while later. He was a bit shy, and all I did was talk and help him relax. After he left, the third man showed up, and when he left, I was sure I couldn't take it anymore. Then the department sales manager showed up. I guess that's what it means to be a manager. I was exhausted when Lloyd came back to the room that evening. And of course, I had some time with him before we drove home. On Tuesday, we went to the Southern Region branch office. Their sales manager, Sid Green, and the 4 salesmen, Eric Green, Ian Stone, Leroy Johnson, and Sam Schuss, met with Lloyd and me, and we went through the same routine. I was too tired to engage with Lloyd when he returned to the room, and I slept the entire way home. On Wednesday, we went to the Central Region branch office. All in all, this was a pretty amazing week. I got to experience things I'd only fantasized about. I had multiple interactions with men at the same time, and I earned $400 in tips. But most importantly, I enjoyed myself. I still felt awful about being unfaithful to Randy afterward. Someone else. I became a totally different person and really put a lot of energy into whatever we did. But once it was over, I reverted back to myself and felt like I just wanted to disappear. I felt like 2 different people. The work version of me who does what I'm told, which I dislike, and the other me, the loving wife and mother. That's the real me. I now don't feel anything when I'm doing my job. I guess that's what it means to be in this line of work. I put the journal down and stared out over the gorge. This would be a perfect place to end it all, I thought. Nobody would find the body for a long time, if ever. But why was I thinking about ending my life? I didn't do anything wrong. It was that maggot Lloyd Butcher and Jenny who did wrong. I shouldn't be the one to suffer for what they did. They should. But I was suffering. Jenny's writing sounded less remorseful. It seemed like she enjoyed what she did. I wondered if she enjoyed it more than being with me. I decided that when she returned, I would confront her. If she denies anything or doesn't tell me the truth, I'll take Jana and go live with Mom. Divorce is too kind an end for her after what she did to us. Then Monday, I'll confront Mr. Lloyd Butcher. I picked up the journal and read about Jenny's activities. She entertained all of the managers at a Christmas party and spent New Year's Eve in a hotel room, available to any company employee who wanted to meet her. Judging by her writing, there were over 20 individuals involved. No wonder I wasn't invited. Throughout the year, she met with customers at their lounges, hotels, or places of business. She even made arrangements with a pizza delivery guy as a tip after he brought pizzas to a meeting. At one management retreat, she participated in a memorable performance with a group of entertainers that, according to her, would stay in the memories of everyone who saw it. Her writing revealed a lot about her thoughts, whether she meant to or not. I felt I could almost read her mind. I read about her dual personality, but the only side I ever saw was the one she displayed at home. I don't know if I would like the other side. The last journal entry was from just a week ago. She was out of town at a company function, and I could bet she was the center of attention again. I couldn't stand to hear any more about her activities. I just wanted to escape my misery. I closed the journal and shut my eyes. The images of everything she described swirled around in my head. I leaned over the gorge and became sick, losing the first beer and what little breakfast remained. Afterward, I rinsed my mouth out with a swig of beer and lay down in the weeds, crying. I was feeling sorry for myself. I had no clue any of this was happening. How could I not have known? How had I missed the signs? Looking back, I could see things that should have made me suspicious, but I had no reason to doubt or mistrust Jenny. I loved her. She always told me when she had a problem. So maybe she didn't think what she was doing was an issue. We never fought. She kept up with her household duties and was always a great mother to Jana. Sure, our intimacy had declined a bit, but I thought that was a byproduct of our busy lives. I wondered how many times I was unaware of what was happening. I never attended any of her company events, usually because I wasn't invited, or I skipped them because I'm not much of a party person. What else did I miss? I felt partly responsible. The men in her life easily manipulated Jenny. When we married, I vowed never to take advantage of her trusting nature. I didn't want to do to her what other men had done. Her father had dominated every aspect of her life until she went to college, including how she dressed, her activities, and dating. In college, she was free to make her own choices, but she became involved with a man just like her father, domineering and controlling. He took advantage of her emotionally and then discarded her. I met her just after she lost her job because the restaurant owner was caught doing something inappropriate with her. She was very trusting and believed everyone, especially men, when they told her what she wanted to hear. I realized I wasn't paying attention to the men around her. I had never felt more foolish than at that moment. Someone once said that hindsight is 20/20ths. Hindsight can be harsh. March 16, 2008, Sunday. Mom walked us to the car as we left. Randy, please call and let me know what's happening, and don't do anything to get yourself in trouble. I know you'll find a solution. I love Jenny just as much as you do. But if half of what you told me about last night is true, then she's changed and isn't the same Jenny you married. I trust your judgment. Remember, you've got Jana to worry about. I'll call. Mom. Jana. And I got home in the afternoon and played in the backyard for the rest of the day. She was totally exhausted by the time I put her to bed for the night. I grabbed a couple of beers and went to the living room to wait for my wife to come home from work. At 9 o'clock, the front door opened and Jenny stepped through carrying her suitcase. "Hi, honey," she said as she set her bag down. "How was your weekend? Did our little girl behave herself?" I looked up from my beer and said, "My weekend was probably not as good as yours. I only dealt with one person. You probably had dozens." She looked at me as if I had just grown a second head. "What's that supposed to mean? I was working all weekend. I'm tired, and the flight back was lousy. Now I come home to your weirdness. What the hell?" I reached under the chair, grabbed the journal, and flung it across the room. It nearly hit her in the head as it whizzed by and crashed into the china cabinet. She stood there with her mouth open, staring at me like I had just grown a second head. I didn't move. She turned and went to the china cabinet. When she saw what had just destroyed the glass front and the wine glasses from our wedding, she froze. She didn't do anything for a long time. Finally, she reached into the mass of broken glass and picked up the journal. The next thing she did surprised me. She quietly walked out the back door. I got up and looked out the kitchen window and saw her sitting on the little swing set, clutching the journal to her chest and sobbing violently. I was in no mood to interfere with her, so I went back out to the living room and started beer number 2. I finished beer 2 and started number 3 when I heard the back door open. Jenny came in and sat down across from me, placing the journal on the coffee table. I didn't know nor care if she was all cried out or not, but her face was red and puffy, and the mascara from her eyes was streaming down her cheeks. Her normally well-kept hair was a mess, her bottom lip was quivering, and she was still breathing heavily. She looked down at the book and spoke with a hoarse voice. "Now you know. What are you going to do?" I glared across at her and said, "I haven't decided yet, but whatever I do will be big. You might say epic." "Are you going to divorce me?" she asked quietly. "Like I just said, I haven't decided yet." She looked up, caught my eye, and said, "I'm almost glad you know. I never wanted to get in as deep as I am. I never wanted to hurt you, hurt us. But I did. I know what I did. I know what I am. And I have no excuses. I never wanted to start. I just want it all to end. I want to go back to being a normal working mother. I'm tired of everything. All the lies and all the people controlling my life. I want to be with you and Jana. But I'm afraid that I've totally screwed that up. You will never know how sorry I am for what I did, for what I am. Randy, talk to me. Please say something. I read your journal, everything, and I have a couple questions. First, was this weekend just another event for your journal?" She bowed her head and said, "I was pretty sure, but I had to ask. I didn't want to know the details, but I did want to know something very important. Did you do it voluntarily and did you enjoy it?" This weekend was a management retreat, and it was set up a long time ago. I had to be there. I'm part of the team. Yeah, the part that spends all the time in compromising situations, I replied. She didn't respond to that. She just looked down at the table. I watched her sitting there and said, "You didn't answer my question. Did you enjoy it? Did you do it because you wanted to?" From what I read, it seemed like you were really into everything you did. No, I didn't enjoy it more than we ever did. Just differently, Randy. I love you. I never wanted to hurt you. I'll admit that I do enjoy the attention, but it's different from what you and I have. You and I connect intimately. Everyone else, well, it's different. And no matter what I say or how I say it, I come off as a liar, a cheater. I can't deny it. I do enjoy it when I'm with someone else. I still do it because I have to. But I never enjoyed lying to you. There, I said it. Is that what you wanted to hear? I'm not sure what I wanted to hear. I just didn't want to hear any lies. I'll give you one thing. I don't think you're lying. I don't think you could lie your way out of this mess anyway. We sat in silence for a long time. So, is there still an us anymore? She asked softly. Honestly, I don't see how there can be. You put your life ahead of your family. I paused, then added, you abandoned Jana and me for a long line of so-called clients. No, I don't see any way for us to exist again. The us you're talking about ceased to exist the minute you got involved with someone else. I was just too stupid to notice. Jenny fell onto the couch, sobbing into the cushions. And speaking of that person, I plan to go to work with you on Monday and confront him. From what you wrote, he blackmailed you into all of this. He is responsible for getting you into this mess, but you were responsible for staying there. I've always believed that everyone involved in a bad situation has to pay. I don't know how many people you've been with, but each and every one of them is just as guilty as he is. I want to punish everybody, but he will have to do for now. Let me tell you something I remembered from a long time ago. During the time of the Cold War, politicians had a term for what I want to do. They called it the nuclear response. If someone did something against the United States, then the retaliation would be swift and devastating. One atomic bomb, and the problems would be gone, as would many innocent people. If I had an atom bomb, I would use it on him and press the button. That's what I want to do. I want to make everybody pay, and pay dearly. And I don't give a damn about collateral damage. I don't know how realistic that is, so I'll start by confronting that maggot on Monday. Randy, don't do anything stupid. He's a powerful man with a lot of friends. You might get into something you can't get out of, just like me. Monday, one way or the other. I'll end this now. Get out of my sight. I don't want you near me. You can sleep in the spare bedroom from now on. Just get the hell out of my sight. Jenny ran from the room, sobbing, followed closely by the sound of the spare bedroom door slamming. I got up and got another couple of beers. I wasn't going to sleep very well, so I might as well sleep tight. March 17, 2008, Monday. Jenny sat quietly as we drove to her work. She spent the night crying. I knew that because every time I got up to go to the bathroom, I heard her. Her ID badge got us into the building and past the guard. Jenny went to her office, and I walked past the guard. Jenny went to her office, and I walked past the receptionist into Butcher's office. He was sitting behind his desk, smiling. I didn't know what to make of it, but it didn't matter. I was ready to confront him. Before I could take 2 steps, something grabbed me around the neck and pulled me backward to the floor. I felt something very heavy on my chest and looked up to see a huge man dressed in a security guard's uniform sitting there. And another was using his knee to hold my head down to the floor. No matter how much I struggled, I was pinned under 500 pounds of muscle, so I gave up. I was looking up as Butcher's face came into view overhead. He looked down at me and smiled, saying, "I was wondering when you would show up. I've been expecting you." The guard at the front door called when he saw you come in. The two gentlemen holding you down are part of my personal guard. They will do anything I ask, including breaking your neck and finding that cute little daughter of yours and doing something you wouldn't want to know about. As for that woman you call your wife, she's mine. I own her. She's mine to do what I want with, and you can't do anything about it. I've got a good thing going here with her, and if you try to interfere in any way, I'll have you gutted and thrown in the nearest dumpster. Then I'll make sure your little Jenna never sees the second grade. Do you understand what I'm saying here? All I could do was mumble. I still wanted to get up and confront him, but I was outnumbered and outgunned. Well, Mr. Brave Husband to the rescue, let me just show you what I mean. I couldn't see very well from the floor, but I heard him say, "Jenny, come in here." A door opened, and I heard Jenny say, "Oh my God. No, please don't hurt him, please." Butcher yelled, "Shut up and get over here. I want to give your hubby a little demonstration." The two overstuffed guards wrestled me into a sitting position and lifted me, placing me in a chair. One hand cuffed my hands behind me, and the other cuffed my feet to the legs of the chair. Someone shoved a gag in my mouth. I was facing Butcher and Jenny as the two guards stood behind me with one hand on each of my shoulders. "Now, Jenny, I want you to show your little hero here just what kind of work you do for us. So get ready." She stood there, looking at me for a long time. Butcher reached up, grabbed a handful of her long black hair, and pulled her head close to his face, whispering something in her ear. I don't know what he said, but she immediately stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. I struggled against the chair, desperate to get out and confront him. Suddenly, everything went dark. I didn't know what hit me. The next thing I remembered was waking up in a hospital room. There was an IV in my left arm, and my right arm was in a cast. I could only see out of one eye, and my mouth felt like it was full of cotton. When I tried to call out for a nurse or someone, nothing came out. The door opened, and a police officer walked in. As he got close enough for me to focus, I noticed it was the local chief of police. He walked over and smiled. "How are you, Mr. Brooks? Not in too much pain, I hope. You're probably wondering what happened. Well, we found you in your car off Mayfield Road in a ditch. It looks like you swerved to avoid a deer. Well, that's the story we filed down at the office. But you and I know better, don't we? See, Lloyd Butcher is my brother-in-law, and he's done a lot for me. One of those things was an evening with your wife, so I want to stay on his good side. That's why, when he called and told me you fell down a flight of stairs, I was only too happy to take care of things for him. I didn't want him involved in any way. That's why you ran off the road." He paused, his smile fading as he leaned closer. "Now, just so you understand me, if you don't go along with my little story, then I'll have to pay a visit to your home and find some illegal drugs or something that your neighbors wouldn't be too pleased about. Keep quiet and let my brother-in-law do what he wants, and nobody gets hurt, especially you or that lovely daughter of yours. Capis?" I couldn't respond. I felt completely defeated. I could barely keep my eyes open, let alone resist. I nodded weakly. The chief of police patted me on the shoulder, grinning, then turned and left the room. March 19, 2008, Wednesday. Jenny drove me home from the hospital and helped me into bed. I had a broken arm, a broken jaw, 2 broken ribs, and several bruises and scrapes. I needed all the help I could get, but I didn't want it to be her. Hell, I hadn't seen her since she was in a vulnerable position in front of Butcher. She showed up to take me home without a word. I didn't ask where she'd been for the last 2 days, and I didn't care anymore. I didn't say a word to her, and she didn't say anything to me. She just looked sad. Jenny avoided me when she was home, and little Jana helped whenever I asked for something to drink. March 22, 2008, Saturday. I was able to get around by myself a bit and move to the living room. Around 6 o'clock, the front door opened, and Jenny walked in. Closely behind her were the same 2 guards that had assaulted me. And then Butcher. Butcher held out a small gift bag and placed it next to the chair where I was sitting. It's just a small get-well present. I don't want my favorite employee to feel that we're neglecting her little husband. It's some DVDs for you to watch while you're incapacitated. I know you'll enjoy watching them almost as much as we enjoyed making them. Jenny just looked at the floor as he stood over me, gloating. Jenny, dear, would you please go into the kitchen and get me something to drink? My throat is awfully dry, and stay in there until I call you. Oh, now don't worry. We're only going to talk. Now go on. Jenny left, and Butcher pulled up the coffee table and sat down. Okay, Randy, you don't mind if I call you Randy, do you? Well, Randy, here's what's going to happen from now on. Jenny is going to continue working for me. She's going to do what she did before. But since you now know, I can expand her duties a bit. Before, she only worked during business hours. Now she can work in the evenings and on weekends too. If I call and tell her to go somewhere, she will go. If I tell her she's to work the weekend, she will work the weekend. If she is to travel for business, then she travels. He paused, leaning closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. If you make one bit of trouble, then, well, you know what happened before. It may happen again. It may happen to someone else too. Just be quiet. Live your life like the submissive husband you are. And don't make waves. I get really mad when someone makes waves. You don't want me to get mad now, do you? I didn't say a word. I just glared back at him with all the hate I could muster. Good, we understand one another. Now, is there anything you want to say to me before we go? The bandage around my jaw didn't make talking easy, but I managed to mumble. Yeah, but your two goons there prevent me from speaking my mind. Oh, don't worry about them. They won't do anything this time. So speak up, my boy. Okay, here's what I have to say. A quote that seems appropriate. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. Butcher and his goons just stood there, looking at me like I was a monster from outer space. Then he smiled and said, "The little worm is a bookworm too. Just say what you want to say in plain English. What I'm saying is that I'm going to get you one day. I'm going to get everybody. I'm going to make you all pay for what you did to Jenny and what you put me through. So if I were you, I'd be constantly looking over my shoulder. Mark my words. I'm going to take you down and everybody in your little company. Everyone's going to pay, and pay dearly. And there will be one hell of a lot of collateral damage. Mark my words." Butcher laughed, patting me condescendingly on the head. "And just how do you plan to accomplish this? A man like you can't even protect his own wife, let alone take revenge on hundreds of people. You're all talk." Jenny came back into the room and sat down. Butcher sneered. "It seems like your little hubby wants to play the hero. He wants to protect you and make sure bad men like me get their just rewards. It's all a fantasy, of course, but I just want to tell you that your work hours have expanded. We'll talk about the details tomorrow, but suffice it to say that Randy here is going to be sleeping alone a lot from now on. Now, go get ready. You have an appointment at the Crown Plaza at 9. A client of ours from Detroit is in town for the weekend, and I promised him you'd visit. Dress nicely. He's an important client. Now go." Jenny looked sadly at me and turned to go upstairs. Butcher smiled and patted me on the head as he and his two goons left. An hour later, Jenny walked into the room, looking beautiful but sad. "I have to go. I don't know when I'll be back. Randy, I'm really sorry things got like this. I never expected our lives to turn out like they did. I love you and never want to see you hurt. I know you are hurting beyond belief, and for that, I'll be eternally sorry. I know you want to leave and can't. So I'll try to bargain with Lloyd to see if you can get away and take Jonna with you. I'll do whatever I can. I don't know if I can make it work, but I'll try. Please don't do anything until I see what I can do. Please, for my sake. I don't want to watch them hurt you again." She turned to leave but stopped, turning around to ask, "Randy, what was that quote you said to Lloyd? What did you mean?" I looked sadly from the little bag of DVDs beside the chair up to her face, looking her square in the eyes. "It's a quote from Edgar Allan Poe. The story is the cask of Amontillado *. What it means is that I'm going to get my revenge on everyone who has wronged me. It will be swift and devastating, and nobody will ever know what I did." She just stared at me for the longest time, tears welling up in her eyes, knowing full well that I meant her as well. "I want you to know that I still love you," she said. "I hope that when this is all over, we can try to get back to a normal life as husband and wife. I know the healing will be difficult, but I want you and me to be us again. I believe we can." "I hope so, at least," I replied. She bowed her head as she turned and left. She didn't come home that night, or many nights following that. March 25, 2008, Tuesday. The little bag full of DVDs that Butcher brought me was still sitting next to the chair. I had no interest in seeing Jenny in action. I already knew from her journal what she did. I didn't need to see it. She told me she did it against her will. She told me she enjoyed it. She told me she was sorry for hurting me. She asked me not to do anything and just wait until she sorted things out. She cheated. She lied. She hurt me, but I didn't care anymore. I was past caring. I just wanted her to feel as much pain as I did. I wanted everybody involved to pay. I wanted my revenge. I couldn't think of anything else but revenge. Going back to the way we were was impossible. I calmly got up, took the bag of DVDs, and hid them in the back of my bedroom closet. I wanted them out of my sight, but I thought I might need them later. April 27, 2008, Sunday. My broken bones had almost healed. At least I was no longer wearing a bandage on my chin, so I could eat normal food with only a little discomfort. The cast would come off my arm in a few days. Jenny staggered in about 6 o'clock this morning and fell into bed exhausted. She didn't even bother to take her clothes off. She'd been doing that a lot lately. I just closed her bedroom door. I think she spent more time away from home now than at home. I noticed these things and logged the pattern of her activities because I was still planning what to do. I had a kernel of a plan in mind that would take out all of those responsible for my pain all at once, even Jenny. This would be my own nuclear response. I needed to find out one more thing before I set everything in motion. I knew in my heart that Jenny was simply the victim in this, but I didn't care anymore. Maybe Butcher was responsible for getting her into the mess in the first place, but she was equally responsible for continuing to do the things he wanted. It seemed to me that she grew to want it as much as he did, and chose her life at work over her life at home. That made any chance of forgiving her or staying with her impossible. I just wanted to get as far away from her as I could. It was almost sundown, and I was enjoying a beautiful spring day sitting in the backyard by Jana's swing set when Jenny came out the back door. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I replied. She walked over and sat on the little picnic table next to the swing set. "I haven't seen you in a while," she said. "I've been very busy lately. I'm really sorry about everything. I really messed up our lives. I miss you and Jana. I think about both of you all the time now. I know you don't care about me, but I still care about you. I'm sorry I haven't been able to get you out of this mess, but Lloyd insists that we pretend to be a happily married couple. I think he's just being difficult because he can be. How are you holding up?" I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to be near her. I just wished she would go away so I could get on with my life apart from her and that company. But I still felt something for her. "I'll survive," I muttered. "Can I ask you a question? Have you kept up the journal? I read it. It's important for me to know, but I can't tell you why right now." Yes, I have the best I could. Sometimes I don't remember things too clearly or I don't get a person's name, but I write in it whenever I can." "Do you still keep it in the same place?" "I won't go looking for it. I just want to know in case something happens and I need names and dates." "Yes, It's under the nightstand in my bedroom. Okay, that's all. Would you like something to eat? She looked at me for a moment, and then put her hands over her face, starting to cry. I'm sorry, she said, but that's the first normal thing you've said to me since you found out. Yes, I would love something to eat. We ate together as a family for the first time in over a month. Jana and Jenny talked, and I just sat quietly. One dinner doesn't make us a family again. We were just 3 people that shared the same house, and for a moment, the same table. It won't be like that forever. April 28, 2008, Monday. I sat alone in my room, reviewing my plan. It was perfect and sure to achieve everything I wanted. All I had to do was be patient and not waver from the path. Once it was set in motion, my plan would allow me to be free of Jenny without worrying about Butcher. It would leave her behind to suffer the consequences of her actions and allow me to take Jana and move far away to start over. It would also ensure that all those who took advantage of her would face their own consequences. The impact would be significant. I picked up the phone and made a call. May 7, 2008, Wednesday. Jenny came home from work, looking as she usually did these days. Her hair was a mess, and her makeup was all over the place. Sometimes she came home with her clothes buttoned wrong or torn. One time, she came home without her blouse, saying she lost it somewhere. She just waved at me and went up to her room. A few minutes later, she was in the shower. I never moved. I just sat patiently in the living room. A few minutes later, she came down the stairs. I got up and walked over to her and said, "Butcher called while you were in the shower and left you a message. He said you were to go to the Hilton on Parkway and see a friend of his named Manny. The next time you talk to that son of a gun, tell him that I'm not his messenger boy. If he wants you to go somewhere, he'll have to talk to you himself. From now on, I'm out of the loop." I handed her the message written on a little piece of paper and went back to my chair. Jenny turned around and went back upstairs. 30 minutes later, she was dressed and out the door. She didn't say a word. I sat in the living room in the dark and cried, thinking about what I had done. The beer didn't help. May 24, 2008, Saturday. I could hear her retching all the way in the kitchen. Jenny was in the bathroom upstairs throwing up breakfast. A few minutes later, she came into the room. "Randy, I'm sick. I mean really sick. I've got a fever. My throat hurts, and I ache all over. I think I've got the flu that's going around. If I do, then I'll be miserable for a couple of days, and then it will be over. I don't want Jana or you to get it, so please stay away. Can you get me something for my throat and some Tylenol, please? I can't go out or to work like this, so I'll just stay in bed until it's gone. Go back to bed. I can take care of Jana, and I'll get you something." She went upstairs, and I took Jana out for ice cream and a visit to the pharmacy. May 30, 2008, Friday. I got up to take Jana to school and go to work as I usually did and found that Jenny had already left. This was the first time she'd been out of the house since last weekend. Obviously, her flu was gone, or she wouldn't have gone to work. But maybe Butcher called and reminded her that she wasn't keeping everybody happy down at the office and that she just had to work through whatever she had. Whatever. I just had to keep doing what I was supposed to do and act like the devoted husband. I didn't want to end up in the hospital again, or worse. December 25, 2008, Thursday. Summer and fall had come and gone. Jenny was working harder than ever, sometimes away from home for days at a time. She was looking thinner and more haggard every time I saw her. We rarely spoke to one another. Whenever she took our little girl to the park or shopping, she always came back with a smile. We celebrated a very quiet Christmas. Jana didn't notice any difference because Santa brought her the Barbie doll she wanted, along with Barbie's house, Barbie's Corvette, and Ken. Jana was in Barbie heaven. I told Jenny that I didn't want anything from her, but she gave me an expensive gold pen and pencil set anyway. I didn't get her anything. In the afternoon, Jana and I went over to Mom's for dinner. Jenny wasn't welcome at her house anymore, so she stayed home. Mom knew everything that was happening and now refused to even talk to Jenny. I think if she could, Mom would strangle her. We had a lovely dinner, and Mom gave Jana Barbie's best friend, Skipper. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. J. Robert Oppenheimer. February 13, 2009, Friday. I was working at my desk, doing the incredibly boring task of updating the course catalog on the company website, when there was a knock at my office door. I looked up and saw a man I had never seen before. "Mr. Brooks." "Mr. Randolph Brooks?" he asked. "Yes, I'm Randy. What can I do for you?" "I'm Detective Archer from the State Police. Is your wife, Jennifer Brooks?" "Yes," I replied, feeling a sudden sense of dread. "What's this all about?" "I regret to inform you that your wife has been killed," he said. "Now, we don't know all the details, but I can tell you what we do know. You need to come with me." I just sat there, stunned. I tried to stand but couldn't. I reached for the phone but didn't know what to do. The detective placed his hand on mine, gently stopping me from reaching for it. "Sir, I'm sorry for your loss, but you need to come with me. Can I call someone for you, or tell someone here?" Yeah, I need to tell my boss. I need to call someone to pick up my daughter at school." Somehow, between the two of us, I informed my boss of my situation and got a neighbor to pick up Jana. The detective walked me out to his car and drove to the hospital. On the way, he told me what he knew. "Mr. Brooks, I'm sure this will be hard to hear, but it seems that your wife's boss killed her as she sat at her desk. According to witnesses, he attacked her from behind with a large, heavy object, striking her repeatedly before some of the other employees pulled him off. She never regained consciousness and died on the way to the hospital. We don't have a motive yet, but the building was sealed and detectives are trying to find out the details. You wouldn't have any information that could help our investigation, would you?" I just sat quietly, staring out the window, trying to process what I had just heard. When we arrived at the hospital, I wasn't required to view Jenny's body. There were enough witnesses to identify her. I had to fill out paperwork pertaining to the disposition of her remains when the police released her body. I noticed that I used the pen she gave me for Christmas to sign the papers. After everything was completed, I tossed the pen in the trash and just sat in the waiting room, staring blankly at the television. The detective drove me back to work, where I picked up my car and drove home. Along the way, I picked up Jana. I made her dinner and put her to bed before calling Mom and telling her about Jenny. I sat in the living room with a beer and stared at nothing. I felt nothing. February 16, 2009, Monday. I took off work to arrange for Jenny's cremation. Mom went with me because I wasn't sure if I could do it alone. Mom moved in on Saturday and had been taking care of Jana and me. She said that she was going to stay until things got back to normal. I never intended for Jenny to die like that. I only planned to get away from her and for her to suffer as much as I had. Now, I would have to live with her death on my conscience for the rest of my life. When I got back home, I went to bed and slept peacefully for the first time since I found out. I didn't dream about anything. February 18, 2009, Wednesday. I grabbed a couple of boxes and headed upstairs to start packing up Jenny's bedroom. About halfway through, I found her journal again. I scanned it quickly to see if there was any reference to me knowing about her situation. There wasn't anything new, just more of her personal experiences. I reached into my pocket, pulled out Detective Archer's card, and picked up the phone. "Archer here," a deep voice said on the other end. "Hello, Detective Archer. This is Randy Brooks. I just found something that might be important in the investigation of Jenny's death. It's a journal that she kept. I read part of it, but I can't describe what I read. You've got to see it to believe it. As a matter of fact, Mr. Brooks, I was going to call you. We've had a couple of major developments in the investigation, and I need to talk to you. Is it okay if I come by your house this afternoon, say around 2? "That's fine. I'll be here." I answered the door at 2:15. "Hello, Detective Archer." I greeted him as he stepped in. "This is my mother, Marie Brooks. Thank you for coming over. Let's go into the living room." Mom chimed in, asking, "Would you like something to drink?" "Just water, please, Mom." I was nervous about what the detective had to say. I pretty much knew what he was going to say, but hearing it would be different than thinking it. Mom brought each of us a bottle of water and set a plate of her oatmeal cookies on the coffee table. Nobody could resist her oatmeal cookies. "Mr. Brooks, I've got several things to tell you about the investigation. Some you won't like, but you need to know. First of all, there has been a major development concerning Mr. Butcher. This past Monday, a judge set bail for him at $1 million during his arraignment on the murder charges. That evening, Mr. Butcher's wife posted his bail. Sometime that night, she shot him multiple times. He's dead." I felt a strange sense of satisfaction upon hearing this, but I kept my expression neutral. "The reason she killed him is directly related to the next part that I have to tell you about," the detective continued. "Sir, did you know that your wife was HIV positive? Her autopsy report came back with positive results." "Oh my God." "No," I said, genuinely shocked. I had no idea. "Well, she was. And now the state health department is involved. They're going to want you and your daughter to be tested. I know this is tough, but I have to ask. When was the last time you were intimate with your wife?" I thought for a moment, then replied, "It's been a long time. We separated in March of last year. We lived in the same house but slept in separate bedrooms. We did this mostly for Jana's sake. I don't know how long this arrangement would have lasted, but it's been a year since we've been together that way." "Okay, but I think the health department will still want you to be tested," Archer said. "Can you tell me the reason you separated?" he asked. "It's hard to talk about, but it's all here in her journal," I said, handing it to him. "I also found these DVDs that show her with other people. I suspected she was seeing another man, and when I confronted her, she admitted that she was. I thought she was lying to protect someone, but until now, I didn't know the extent of it. It looks like she was involved with Mr. Butcher at work and several others. I only read part of the journal, but it seems like she kept a record of what she did." Archer opened the journal and read for a few seconds, then got a wide-eyed look on his face. "I think this is going to help a lot. Actually, the health department will need a copy to track down all the people she may have been involved with. We might have a major health problem on our hands," he said. "I'll keep you informed of what's happening. As for the murder case against Mr. Butcher, it's moot. His death ended that case and started another involving his wife." Detective Archer paused, then added, "We found hundreds of DVDs in Butcher's office showing your wife with other people. Between this journal and the videos, we may be able to track down everybody and get them tested." I just stared at him, feeling a mix of shock, anger, and sadness. Tears started to form in my eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Brooks," said the detective, standing up. "You've been very helpful. I'll keep in touch." When the detective left, Mom turned to me and said, "Randy, you weren't entirely honest with the officer. You knew last year what she was doing and said you couldn't do anything about it. You should have told him." "I couldn't, Mom. I already look like a foolish husband, and I didn't want the police to think that I didn't have the guts to stand up to Jenny. I did stand up to Butcher, and all I got was a trip to the hospital. I was afraid that if I said or did anything, then it would have been much worse. I didn't want to take the chance that Jana would get hurt." "Did Jenny threaten Jana?" Mom asked. "No, Mom, Jenny didn't. Butcher did," I said, my voice trembling with the memory. "He told me if I said anything to anybody about what Jenny was doing, then he'd make sure that Jana would be hurt badly. I didn't want to take the chance that he'd follow through with his threat, so I kept quiet. That's why I rearranged some facts with Detective Archer just now." Mom looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of pity and sadness. "What you went through over the last year must have been pure hell. I don't blame you for hating Jenny. I'm just glad you protected Jana and took care of everything else as best as you could. Mom, I did what I had to do. I hated myself for doing it. But I did it. And really, it's just beginning. Just wait and see. March 9, 2009, Monday. Detective Archer brought me a copy of the health department's preliminary report when he came to tell me that Jenny's death investigation was closed. The problem was worse than anybody thought. It seemed that the spread of the HIV infection from Jenny could reach hundreds of people. The health department was calling it an HIV hotspot. The local papers dubbed it the Thompson epidemic. Whatever you called it, it was a major HIV outbreak with Jenny and Thompson incorporated at the center. The preliminary report outlined the following. 1. Jenny had been with 411 different people that they could identify by name. There were others they couldn't identify. 2. Of the 411 people, 36 had tested HIV positive. 3. They were still tracing the partners of these 411 people, and then their partners, and so on. 4. Given the incubation period, it could take 9 to 12 months to determine the full extent of the outbreak. 5. It remained unclear how Jenny had been infected. What the official report didn't say was that Jana and I were not infected. All but one of the managers at Thompson tested positive. The corporate headquarters closed the local branch, laying off all the staff, pending an investigation into the criminal activities of management. The newspapers obtained a copy of the health department report, and the media had a field day with it. Every newspaper in the state reported that the number of HIV test requests had tripled, and that doctors' offices were flooded with testing requests. Only the health department knew the names of those involved, but some people came forward to speak to the press, placing the blame solely on Jenny. Even national news outlets covered the story. The media swarmed all over town, making my life a living nightmare. I disconnected my phone due to threatening calls. Mom had to take Jana to school every day, as I was barred from the building, labeled a health risk. Every few days, a reporter showed up at my door looking for an exclusive story. I stopped answering the door altogether. I still went to work, but the weight of judgmental eyes and whispers followed me. I did my job silently and returned home to a house filled with emptiness. Life's a struggle, and then you die, I muttered to myself one day. April 2, 2009, Thursday. I got a call from my insurance company informing me that they had settled Jenny's life insurance policy claim. I could pick up the check on Monday. Jana was the beneficiary of her $1 million policy. That was only part of it. I had met with a local attorney who urged me to sue Thompson for Jenny's wrongful death. He argued I had a strong case based on his interpretation of the law. I didn't know much about the legal system but agreed to proceed. I had nothing left to lose. He also suggested suing all the individuals mentioned in Jenny's journal. He said it was unlikely that I'd recover much money, but at least everyone's name would be part of the public record. The health department was keeping the identities of the infected individuals confidential, but I had access to Jenny's journal, which was enough to initiate the lawsuits. I agreed, thinking that public exposure might be a more effective punishment. June 15, 2009, Monday. My attorney and I met with Thompson's lawyers. I had given my deposition the week before, and their attorneys reviewed it thoroughly, asking personal questions. I answered as best as I could, following my attorney's guidance. After extensive negotiation, Thompson offered a $500,000 settlement. My lawyer was pleased, whispering to me that he expected the offer to increase. After more back-and-forth exchanges, I ultimately accepted a $500,000 settlement. My attorney took a significant portion of that money, as expected. As we left the building, he smiled, saying, "This is going to set a precedent for the other individual lawsuits. We should do well in the long run." I thought to myself that his definition of "we" was more about his own gains than mine. December 25, 2009, Friday. Jana and I spent Christmas at Mom's house, away from the chaos of home. It was another quiet holiday for us. But Jana loved the snow and her presents. She seemed to have outgrown Barbie and now wanted video games. I talked to Mom about the idea of moving once all the lawsuits were settled. I wanted to start over somewhere new with Jana, far away from everything. Mom agreed it was a good idea, and she even hinted that she might join us. December 31, 2009, Thursday. Today marked a turning point in my life. Two major things happened. First, the last of the lawsuits was settled, bringing the total count to 244. Of those, I settled 99 cases for a modest amount. 11 were dismissed in court, 5 were thrown out on technicalities, and 46 were dropped due to the defendant's hardships. 6 cases went to trial, with favorable verdicts and substantial awards. The total sum reached approximately $1.4 million, though my attorney took his fair share. Second, I sold my house quietly at a reduced price to a real estate agent. I was eager to leave and start over somewhere else. Money wasn't my priority anymore. I made arrangements for everything to be removed from the house and donated to Goodwill the next morning, except for a few personal items I had already sent ahead. The house would be cleaned thoroughly before the new owner took possession. By the time the cleaning crew finished, Jana and I would be on our way to a new life. January 1, 2010, Friday. I glanced into the back seat, where Jana was asleep among her toys. Next to me on the front seat was a newspaper with a front-page article about a local reporter nominated for a Pulitzer Prize for his coverage of the Thompson epidemic. At least someone had benefited from this mess, I thought bitterly. A recent newspaper article summarized the impact of the scandal. 1. The number of HIV-positive cases had increased from 36 to 54. 2. An additional 107 people had tested positive after contact with those linked to Jenny. 3. Approximately 200 divorces were filed involving people named in the lawsuits. 4. Over 150 domestic violence incidents were reported, connected to the scandal. 5. 72 restraining orders were issued against the 411 people named in the lawsuits. 6. The state health department estimated healthcare costs would exceed $50 million for the infected individuals. 7. All 12 executive managers, 6 department heads, and 23 employees were fired from Thompson. Only 35 staff members were offered transfers to other branches. 8. The police chief and 2 officers tested positive and were subsequently dismissed. 9. No one had yet developed full-blown AIDS. 10. It remained a mystery how or when Jenny contracted HIV. 11. 2 people had been murdered. 12. 2 people had taken their own lives. We had another 1,000 miles to go before reaching our new home. When one door is closed, don't you know another is open? Bob Marley. June 17, 2010, Thursday. I haven't felt anything like this for a long time. I thought that Jenny ripped out of my soul any ability to feel, but lately I've noticed that I occasionally smile at something, usually something Jana said or did. I think she's the only reason I made it this far. God, I love that little girl. As long as she stays my little girl, I may someday get past everything, but it's not going to happen today. Right now, I'm standing outside of a funeral home with my hands in my pockets, staring up at the white front door, afraid to go in. Inside are the ashes of my oldest friend. We were born on the same day, grew up together, played together, laughed together, and learned everything about life together. Hell, we even shared our first experiences together on the same camping trip. I think I got the better end of the deal. We were inseparable. We even went to the same college. That's when we got interested in different things and went down different life paths. We stayed in touch all through the years, but were never as close as when we were growing up. We grew up and became different men. But now he's dead, and I'm an emotional mess and can't go in. I don't want to make a fool of myself in front of all those people, so I don't do anything. I just stand on the sidewalk and stare at the door, hoping that the ground will open up and swallow me whole. As I stared at the door, it opened. Standing there, smiling down at me, was Mrs. Pellegrino. I haven't seen her in almost 12 years, except for a couple pounds and a gray streak in her long black hair. She looked exactly as I remembered her, absolutely gorgeous. When I was a teenager, I used to lie in bed at night and think about her. I would close my eyes and see her long black hair cascading down over her broad tan shoulders, framing her delicate face. Her eyes were hypnotic, but she had the most incredible smile. A smile that could light up the room or make any childhood problem go away. God, I loved that woman, but even then, I knew that it was wrong. After all, she was the mother of my best friend. A friend that is now gone just past the door she's holding open. Despite her beautiful smile, I stood there frozen to the sidewalk, hoping for the ground to open up. I looked down at my feet, the heat of her body forcing my gaze to rise and look up. Those beautiful brown eyes and that broad smile were just inches away. "How are you, Randy?" she asked with her crisp, youthful voice. Even the sounds she made were gorgeous. "I'm fine, Mrs. Pellegrino. I'm just having a little trouble with my feet, though they don't seem to want to move up the steps. I had the same problem when I got here. It's not as bad inside as you think. Really." She took one final step forward and put her arms around me. The mother of my best friend, my dead best friend, was holding me, trying to comfort me. I knew that was all she was doing, but all I could think about was the warmth she radiated. I felt a mix of embarrassment and longing. I had dreamed of this long ago, and after all these years, I was surprised I still felt that way about her. It was more surprising that I could still feel something, anything, and just knowing that was somewhat comforting. I mumbled into her hair at the side of her head. "Thank you. You can't know what he did for me, how much he meant to me. I'm just so sorry he's gone. I miss him a lot." We stood together for a while, holding each other, not saying a word. Just by holding me tenderly, she made me feel like I could almost go through the door and face what was inside. Slowly, she broke our embrace and stood looking into my eyes. She had a quizzical look on her face when she asked, "Randy, I've got a question for you before we go in. I need some honest answers." "Okay, sure, anything you want." Yesterday, a lawyer showed up at my door. She introduced herself and gave me an envelope. The contents were about a trust fund. Somebody set up a trust fund in my son's name for Joshua. It's a trust fund for $1 million. I asked her who was responsible, and she said that nobody knew. An anonymous donor arranged it. I think they do know, but couldn't tell me. My question for you is this. Did you have anything to do with this? Did you set up a trust fund in his name? I looked her straight in her beautiful brown eyes and told the best lie I've ever told when I said, "No, ma'am, I don't know anything about it." She stood there looking at me, and I knew I could never lie to her and get away with it, but I had to try. After a minute, her face went from serious to happy, and she smiled her beautiful broad smile at me as she whispered, "Thank you." I didn't let on that I knew she understood. I just smiled back at her. I don't know if you know, but I'm now Josh's legal guardian. You knew that Porris was sick for the last 3 years, and before he passed, we arranged for me to adopt Josh. So my grandson is now my son. I plan to use the trust fund money to see that Josh gets into the finest schools and colleges. If there is any left over, he can have it as a wedding present. Josh said that he wanted to become a doctor so he can find a cure for what killed his dad. I'm going to try to make that happen. I smiled and said, "Mrs. Pellegrino." "Anna," she interjected. "You are old enough now to call me Anna." She lightly stroked the side of my face as she spoke. I smiled even wider and said, "Anna, I think I can go in now. Will you please escort me?" She turned toward the door and put her hand through my arm, and we walked arm in arm the few feet that seemed impossible to navigate just a few minutes ago. Once inside, a man approached and told Anna they were ready to start. Anna turned to me and kissed me on the cheek. "Please stay afterwards. I want to talk some more, and I want you to meet Josh. He's a good kid. I think you'll really like him." She smiled and pointed to the visitor's book as she quietly melted into the crowd. I signed the book and took a seat near one of the exit doors. The lady next to me handed me a box of tissues, and I helped myself to 6 or 7 before setting it down, just in case. After a few minutes, everyone sat down, and a young man approached the podium. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming. We are here today to celebrate the life of Porris Emmanuel Pellegrino. We all know about his death, how he suffered and died from that plague of modern times, AIDS. But what we want to celebrate today is how he lived, not how he died. He was the friendliest and most genuinely giving man I've ever met. He was real, he was kind, and he was down to earth. He was so down to earth that nobody knew him as Porris. We all knew him as Manny. Manny would give anybody anything." That's when I lost it. I grabbed a handful of tissues and put them to my face and cried. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.